This video is brought to you by the Swapcast, my new podcast which I launched recently on a second channel. Essentially, myself and co-hosts recommend movies, TV shows and sometimes video games in specific categories and rant or rave about our thoughts. While it's a lot less sci-fi focused, our more recent episode was about underappreciated TV shows and my pick was Babylon 5. Basically, it was just my excuse to force my friends to watch the show. The link is down below. Lost in Space has had a weird history as a sci-fi property. The original 60s show was a light-hearted and sometimes bizarre family-friendly affair, remembered now mostly for its great John Williams-written theme tune and starring that guy who was in a much better sci-fi show many years later. After the cancellation of the show, Lost in Space hit the big screen with the enjoyably terrible late 90s movie starring friggin' Joey from Friends. If you haven't seen this movie, grab some beers and some mates because it's such a laugh. Following the failure of the movie, the second attempted reboot, The Robinsons Lost in Space, was also a non-starter. So it seemed like Lost in Space was doomed to be a forgotten relic, something ever so slightly familiar to most thanks to its iconic robot design and gluttony of recognizable catchphrases, but this wasn't to be so. Thanks to legendary TV and Netflix, Lost in Space was revived once again for a new TV series. Is this yet again another failed reboot, or has the formula finally been cracked to bring the Robinson family into the pantheon of sci-fi adventure for today's audience? What's immediately apparent when watching Lost in Space is just how much of an influence The Martian has had on its new incarnation. The Martian, if you haven't seen it, is an absolute must-watch for fans of hard sci-fi, and this more grounded survivalist approach to Lost in Space was a really smart move, making it unique among the modern shows of TV's silver age of sci-fi. The Expanse has already shown us what's possible in terms of great hard sci-fi production design, and Lost in Space delivers the goods in this regard just as well. The new spaceships, spacesuits and vehicles all have that tactile practicality to them, with that near-future NASA sheen that The Martian did so well. The new version of the Jupiter 2 is an excellent hero ship. What was originally a flying saucer for the sake of having a flying saucer now looks and feels like a real working spaceship, a logical-looking extrapolation of current spacecraft technology, but with enough room to really make it a home for our main characters, and the paint job really cements this new design as an iconic ship in its own right. The visual effects are also very strong. Once again, we find ourselves in a truly cinematic looking TV show. The digital environments, space beauty shots, and alien lifeforms are stunningly rendered on screen. Combined with some sharp direction and cinematography, Lost in Space really walks the line between stylistic and grounded. Verisimilitude is the apt word. But outside of the Jupiter 2, the best update is easily the robot. Making this version of the character of alien origin really results in some gorgeous design work. The way it can shift from humanoid to alien in shape is a nice touch, and its face of infinite lights manages to convey a surprising amount of expression. The choice to make it a practical suit was no doubt helpful for keeping the budget down, but also when helping the cast to interact with it. The central conceit of Lost in Space is it being a family drama in outer space. If we're not invested in the family itself, the show pretty much fails right away. Overall though, Lost in Space mostly gets it right. We do start in rather cliche territory, however, with the distant workaholic father having to repair his relationship with his family. It's something we've seen countless times before. But here the presence of Toby Stephens as John Robinson makes it work. Stephens has always been a strong character actor. Even when he was chewing the scenery as a James Bond villain, he was always magnetic to watch. But for Lost in Space, he draws more from his grim and damaged Captain Flynn of Black Sails, which is an awesome show if you haven't seen it, by the way. Folding the Marine character into the same person as the father, and letting Molly Parker take up the more scientific duties as Maureen Robinson is another smart choice. It succeeds in conjuring more avenues of drama between the two, and adds agency to Maureen rather than being relegated to the outer space housewife as she was in the original. An element which can sink any family show is poor child actors, but Lost in Space has found itself a group of talented young performers, capable actors, each with their own individual charisma and screen presence, and it's lucky for the most part they're given well-drawn characters and compelling storylines each. But it's easily Parker Posey as an inspired new version of Dr. Smith who steals the show outright. Posey brings a temperamental energy, wacky comedic edge, and simmering sense of threat to every scene she's in. One of those antagonists who will do anything to survive, and it's her drive to live above all else which has influenced her warped sense of morality. The way the characters bounce off each other is great to watch, and the directions they're taken in are, once again, smart options when jumping off the original IP. The robot taking the place of a father figure for Will gives the character a lot more dimensionality, beyond just being a cool sidekick, and there will no doubt be some big revelations once the show delves further into his alien origins. Judy's plotline was also well constructed. Being a doctor in training, forced into an unprecedented situation, forces her to confront some very harsh realities. There is not always an easy answer in this scenario the family have found themselves in. The writing is suitably morally ambiguous, and Taylor Russell does a great job rendering that inner turmoil on screen. The big weak link, however, is Penny and her teen drama thread. While it's understandable not every teenage kid will grow up to be a scientist, engineer, or doctor, Penny going through the typical teen angst and all this really grinds the pace of certain episodes to a halt. While it does tie into the main plotline, and it does have a nice conclusion, I feel like there are far more interesting avenues to take this character down. While this version of Lost in Space has made a shocking amount of smart choices, the actual storytelling quality has some improving to do. The first season shares similar problems with Star Trek Discovery in that battle between being episodic and serialized at the same time. For the most part, there's a strong core survivalist let's science the shit out of here overarching plot, but its progression and pace of subplots around it isn't always so smooth. While the majority of episodes feature some inventive set pieces and creative solutions, from time to time the obstacles thrown our characters' way come off as a bit contrived. John and Maureen becoming trapped in a tar pit, losing the much needed fuel, they come off as a little clunky sometimes, while John and Maureen making amends and Judy taking on more responsibilities are much needed dramatic payoffs. The way the plot lines bend over backwards to accommodate these payoffs is a little awkward at times. The same issue is present in Penny's boy trouble plotline. That being said, these aren't season-breaking problems and can be easily remedied in future. As it stands right now, Lost in Space is a fiendishly clever update of the original show. The basic premise remains intact, but the writers have simply found a fresher take on the material and added some much needed depth to the story and characters. Season 2 debuts next month, and it looks like we're in for another gritty but awe-inspiring outer space adventure, which I'm very much looking forward to. Although between this, The Expanse, Star Trek Picard, Altered Carbon, and maybe even The Witcher, my fingers might just break off by the time March comes around from all the editing I'm going to do. Mr. Angel asks, do you think the new Foundation series will be good? In general, I choose to be optimistic about these things. I can be more accurate in my expectations when I see a trailer and stuff like that, but I think there's a good chance it'll be good. I think the time is right for an adaptation of Foundation to come out. Big budget TV shows have become the ideal format for adapting dense novel series. Audiences will definitely be more on board with the kind of storytelling which is needed to convey a story like the Foundation series. I am a little skeptical about David S. Goyer being involved though. I don't really rate that guy as a truly great writer, and I'm not sure he's really the man for this kind of job. But all that being said, I'd be thrilled to see the story done justice on screen. A miscellaneous human asks, do you have any good book recommendations? If you mean specifically sci-fi, the Lost Fleet series is really good. I've been listening to that on Audible and I think it's terrific. It's one of those book series which is just begging for a good TV show adaptation. I think that could be awesome. I've also given shout outs to the trilogy of Star Trek Destiny books before, which I will shout out again. I actually think David Mack is one of the best writers to ever contribute to Star Trek. The series he's written for have all been great, and I think he brings a really unique perspective to the Star Trek universe. He's really great at capturing kind of vertical slice of the universe. We're often so confined to Starfleet in the shows, but Mac often brings in civilians or those of other factions to his stories, and it really casts elements of that universe into new lights. For example, in the Vanguard series, one of the main characters is a journalist. I can't think of a single time we've seen a journalist in Star Trek outside of the random dudes on the Enterprise B at the start of Generations, and his more recent Discovery era work was great as well. Also, I've been revisiting The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. If you haven't read that, it's a stone cold classic. So clever and so funny. Give that a read if you haven't. I will also shamelessly plug my own sci-fi novel. It's on Amazon. It's pretty good. You should give it a read. Just another quick shout out to plug my new podcast, link down below. While I thought you guys would be interested in hearing some more Babylon 5 chat, there is a lot outside of sci-fi I also love to talk about, from horror movies, action flicks, comedy, video games, and even more. It's a ton of fun recording it with myself and my mates, and I hope you come along and have a laugh with us sometime too. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. Over on my Patreon you can see videos early as well as a whole host of other benefits. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank all of my patrons now appearing on screen. Until next time, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper. The writing is suitably morally ambiguous, and Taylor Russell does a great job rendering the inner turmoil on screen.